Empress Velcara stepped through the airlock of the human orbital station with the weight of 17 diplomatic visits on her shoulders. 17 worlds. 17 species. All of them had been the same, really. Cold politeness, careful words, and trade agreements signed with forced smiles. She expected nothing different from these humans. Her daughter's hover throne hummed softly beside her, the anti-gravity field keeping Princess Sharera suspended in gentle blue light. The girl's tentacles hung limply over the armrests, her head tilted at an angle she couldn't quite control. Velcara had long since stopped hoping for anything beyond basic courtesy when they went anywhere together. The restaurant was called Starlight Commons, according to the glowing sign above the entrance. Through the wide windows she could see Earth hanging in the distance, that blue and white marble the humans were so proud of. The dining room itself was busy with various species, the low hum of conversation mixing with soft background music. As they entered, Velcara watched the familiar scene unfold like a script she'd memorized. A Corthan couple at the nearest table glanced over, then quickly looked away. A group of Felixian traders stopped mid-conversation, their eyes widening before they forced themselves to look anywhere else. A waiter carrying a tray nearly stumbled when he spotted Sharera, then hurried past with his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. This was normal. This was expected. People didn't know how to react to her daughter, so they pretended not to see her at all. It was easier for everyone that way, or so Velcara had been told by countless advisors over the years. But then one human broke the pattern. "Good evening. Welcome to Starlight Commons." The voice was warm and genuinely happy. Velcara turned to see a young human male approaching, his smile reaching his eyes in a way she'd rarely seen. His name tag identified him as Jake. He wore the simple black uniform of the station's restaurant staff, and he moved with easy confidence. What happened next made Velcara's breath catch in her throat. Jake didn't stop at a respectful distance to address only her. He didn't aim his greeting at the empty space above Sharera's head. Instead he walked right up to the hover throne and did something absolutely shocking. He bent down slightly, bringing himself to her daughter's eye level, and looked directly at her face. "And hello to you," Jake said, his tone just as bright and friendly as when he'd greeted Velcara. "Wow, that's an amazing hover throne you've got there. Is that Zethrani royal design? The energy matrix looks incredible. I've never seen one with that kind of stabilization field before." Sharera's tentacles twitched. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but Velcara saw it. Her daughter was surprised. More than surprised. She was shocked that someone was talking to her like she was actually there. Jake didn't seem to notice anything unusual about the situation. He just kept smiling at Sharera, waiting for a response like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was no pity in his eyes. No discomfort. No forced politeness masking disgust. Just genuine interest. "I'm Jake, and I'll be taking care of you both tonight," he continued, straightening up but keeping his attention split equally between mother and daughter. "Can I get you started with some drinks? We've got this amazing Centauri crystal water that just came in, or if you prefer something warmer, our herbal selection is pretty great." Velcara found herself ordering automatically, her mind still trying to process what was happening. She'd been to hundreds of restaurants across dozens of worlds, and no server had ever spoken to Sharera first. They always addressed the Empress, took her orders, and pretended her daughter was just another piece of furniture. But Jake kept glancing at Sharera, including her in the conversation with small gestures and nods. When he handed them menus, he made sure to place one within easy reach of Sharera's functioning tentacle, the one she could still control with some effort. "Oh, and just so you know," Jake said, leaning in like he was sharing a secret, "the jazz quartet starts in about 10 minutes. They're really good. We've got this Martian saxophone player who's absolutely incredible." He turned to Sharera again. "Do you like music?" The question hung in the air. People didn't ask Sharera questions. They didn't expect her to have opinions or preferences. But Jake stood there, patient and relaxed, clearly waiting for an answer. Sharera's response came in clicking sounds, the language of the Zethrani. But her condition made it difficult. The clicks were uneven, some too soft, others too sharp. It took her nearly 20 seconds to say what should have taken 3. Jake didn't interrupt. He didn't finish her sentence or look away in embarrassment. He didn't make that face people made when they were trying to be polite but really wanted to escape. He just waited, his expression attentive and kind. When Sharera finally finished, Jake's smile grew even wider. "That's awesome," he said simply. "I love music too. The way it can just make you feel things, you know? Like it speaks a language everybody understands no matter where you're from." He tapped the table lightly with his fingers. I'll make sure you get a great spot where you can really enjoy the performance. As Jake walked away to put in their drink order, Velkara sat in stunned silence. Her daughter's tentacles were moving again, that small twitch that meant she was excited. It was an expression Velkara hadn't seen in months. For the first time in 17 diplomatic visits, something unexpected had happened. This human, this simple waiter named Jake, had done something extraordinary. He treated her daughter like a person. And somehow that changed everything. The jazz quartet set up their instruments on the small stage at the far end of the restaurant. Velkara had ordered their meal, though she barely remembered what she'd chosen. Her mind was still replaying that moment when Jake had spoken directly to Sharera, treating her like she mattered. Then the music started. It began soft and slow, a saxophone carrying a melody that seemed to float through the air like smoke. The piano joined in, adding depth and warmth. Velkara glanced at her daughter and saw something that made her chest tighten. Sharera's tentacles were moving. Not the random twitches that came with her condition but deliberate movements. Rhythmic. Following the beat of the music. Her daughter's eyes were half closed, and that one tentacle she could control better than the others was tapping against the armrest of her hover throne in perfect time with the drums. Velkara had seen this before, of course. In private, in their quarters on the ship, Sharera would listen to music and move whatever parts of her body still responded to her will. But never in public. Never where others could see. The advisors had made it clear years ago that such displays were unseemly, that they drew attention to her condition in uncomfortable ways. But here now Sharera seemed to have forgotten where she was. She was lost in the music. Velkara was about to gently remind her daughter to be still when she noticed Jake approaching their table again. The human waiter had been watching them, she realized. Watching Sharera. Princess Sharera, Jake said, and there was something different in his voice now. Something excited and genuine. Would you like to dance? The words hit Velkara like a physical blow. Her respiratory system seized up, forgetting how to pull in air for a long moment. Dance? Her daughter? It was impossible. It was absurd. That's not possible, Velkara heard herself saying, her voice tight. Zethrani don't dance. We don't have that custom, and besides, she can't. I don't mean traditional dancing, Jake interrupted gently, and there was no judgment in his tone. Just kindness. I mean, would you like to move to the music? However feels right to you. He was looking at Sharera now, not at the Empress. Just let the music take you wherever it wants to go. Velkara opened her mouth to refuse, to explain all the reasons why this was inappropriate, why it would only end in embarrassment. But then she made the mistake of looking at her daughter. Sharera's eyes were locked on her mother's face. Those bright, intelligent eyes that had always been the window to the brilliant mind trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. And in those eyes, Velkara saw something that broke her heart and mended it at the same time. Her daughter was pleading. Begging. This was something she wanted so desperately that it shone through every part of her expression. How long had it been since Sharera had wanted anything? How many years had passed since that light of hope had dimmed, replaced by quiet acceptance of a life spent watching from the sidelines? Velkara found herself nodding before she'd made a conscious decision to do so. Jake's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire station. He moved to the hover throne and his fingers danced over the control panel on the side. I'm just adjusting the mobility dampeners, he explained. This'll make it easier to move around. You're still in full control, princess. Just guide it however you want. The restaurant had gone quieter. People were noticing what was happening. Velkara felt a familiar flush of shame creeping up her neck. Everyone was going to see. Everyone was going to watch her daughter struggle and fail and... Just move however you want, Jake said softly to Sharera. I'll follow your lead. And then he stepped back and the music swelled and everything changed. Jake started to move. Nothing fancy at first, just swaying slightly to the rhythm, his feet tapping in time with the beat. He circled around Sharera's hover throne slowly, his movements casual and easy, like he was just enjoying the music by himself. But he was watching Sharera. Waiting. Sharera's tentacle lifted, gesturing weakly to the left. Immediately, Jake spun in that direction, his turn smooth and graceful. He made it look like her gesture had guided him there, like it was part of a choreographed routine they'd practiced together. Another tentacle moved, pointing up. Sharera's functioning hand reached for the throne's control panel and pressed the lift button. The hover throne rose about a foot off the ground. Jake jumped. Not a small hop, but a real leap, matching her height, his arms spread wide. He was moving with her, not for her. When she lowered back down, he landed smoothly and kept moving. The saxophone player saw what was happening and leaned into a longer solo, giving them more time. The pianist was grinning. Sharera's tentacles began moving more actively now, swaying and gesturing. Every movement she made, Jake responded to. When she tilted the throne to the right, he spun that way. When she made the throne bob up and down gently, he added little bouncing steps to his dance. He was treating every tiny motion like it was intentional, like it was part of the art they were creating together. And it was beautiful. Velkara felt moisture on her face and realized she was crying. In Zethrani culture, crying in public was a sign of weakness, of loss of control. But she couldn't stop. Because for the first time in her daughter's entire life, Sharera was dancing. Not being carried. Not being accommodated. Actually dancing as an equal partner, creating something with another person. Jake wasn't helping a disabled girl move. He was dancing with a princess. The way he moved around her, the way he responded to her signals, the way he made her the center of the performance. He'd made Sharera the lead dancer and himself the supporting act. Her daughter was glowing. Actually glowing with joy. When the song ended, the restaurant erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory clapping but real appreciation. People were cheering. Some were wiping their eyes too. And Sharera was clicking rapidly, excitedly, her words tumbling over each other. Again. Again. More music. Again. Jake was breathing hard but grinning. He bowed deeply to Sharera, like she was the queen and he was the humble servant. That was amazing, princess. You're a natural. Velkara stared at this human waiter and realized something profound. In 5 minutes, he'd given her daughter something she'd been unable to provide in 18 years of imperial power. He'd given her the chance to just be alive. They danced 3 more times. Each song was different, each dance unique. By the third one, Sharera had figured out more controls on her hover throne, making it spin and dip in ways that Jake matched with leaps and slides across the floor. The restaurant had become their stage and other diners had stopped eating to watch. When the quartet finally took a break, Jake guided Sharera back to their table. The princess was clearly exhausted. Her tentacles hung limper than before, and her breathing came in rapid, shallow pulls. But her face was transformed. There was a light in her eyes that Velkara hadn't seen in years. Maybe ever. Velkara sat in silence for a long moment, watching Jake pour water for her daughter and adjust the hover throne back to its resting position. He moved with easy familiarity, like helping people was something he did without thinking about it. Finally, the question that had been building in her chest forced its way out. Why did you do that? Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Jake looked up at her, genuinely confused. Do what? Dance with her. Velkara gestured at her daughter, at the hover throne, at everything the gesture implied. Draw attention to her condition. Make everyone in this restaurant watch her struggle. Oh. Jake pulled out a chair and sat down at their table without asking permission. Somehow Velkara didn't mind. The normal rules of royal protocol seemed meaningless after what had just happened. I don't think I understand the question. She wanted to dance and she could dance, so we danced. Why wouldn't I? The simple logic of it made Velkara's head spin. On my world, she began carefully, those who are born with physical imperfections are kept from public view. It's considered the merciful choice. The kind thing to do. Why subject them to stares and whispers and ridicule when they could live quietly, in comfort, away from judgment? Jake's expression changed. It wasn't anger exactly, but something deeper. Something sad. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table as he thought about his words. I have a younger sister, he finally said. Her name's Lily. She was born with something called cerebral palsy. Do you know what that is? Velkara shook her head. It's a condition that affects how her muscles work. She has trouble walking, trouble with coordination. She uses a mobility chair to get around, kind of like the princess's hover throne, but less fancy. He smiled a little at that. When Lily was about 7 years old, she told our parents she wanted to take dance classes. She'd seen a performance somewhere and fell in love with the idea. But how could she? Velkara started to ask. That's exactly what everyone said, Jake interrupted gently. How could she? It's impossible. Dancing requires legs that work properly, balance, strength. Everyone told my parents it was cruel to let her try. That she'd only be disappointed. That other kids would make fun of her. Better to protect her from that pain, right? Velkara nodded slowly. That was exactly the logic her advisors had used for years. But my parents found a teacher who said yes. Miss Patricia, her name was. She was this tiny old woman who'd been teaching dance for 40 years. Jake's eyes were distant now, remembering. She looked at Lily and said, "Of course you can dance. Everyone can dance. We just need to figure out what your dance looks like." "What happened?" Sharera clicked the question, her voice clearer than usual. She was leaning forward, listening intently. Jake turned to her with a warm smile. Miss Patricia adapted everything. When the other kids did pirouettes, Lily did spins in her chair. When they leaped, she'd pop wheelies. When they used their arms for graceful movements, Lily did the same, but from a sitting position. And at the end of the year, there was a recital. "People must have stared," Velkara said quietly. "Oh, they absolutely did," Jake agreed. The auditorium went dead silent when Lily rolled out on stage. You could feel the awkwardness, the pity. But then the music started and Lily began to move. He paused and his voice grew softer. Within 30 seconds, nobody was seeing the wheelchair anymore. They were seeing a 7-year-old kid who loved dancing so much that it poured out of every movement she made. She wasn't a disabled girl trying to dance. She was a dancer who happened to use a chair. Velkara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. But surely the other children. The other kids thought she was amazing, Jake said firmly. They asked her to teach them how to do wheelies. They wanted her to show them her moves. Because kids, at least young kids, they don't see disability the same way adults do. They just see another kid having fun. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes meeting Velkara's directly. "Your Majesty, humans spent a long time getting this wrong. We hid people away. We institutionalized them. We decided that different meant less than. And it took us centuries to figure out the truth." "What truth?" Velkara asked. "That when we exclude people because they're different, we're not protecting them. We're robbing them." Jake's voice was passionate now, but not angry. "We're taking away their chance to live, to try things, to fail, to succeed, to just exist in the world like everyone else. And we're robbing ourselves too. We're losing all the things they could teach us, all the ways they could contribute, all the perspectives they could share." Sharera's tentacles slowly stretched across the table and came to rest on her mother's hand. It was a gentle touch, barely any pressure at all, but it felt like the most important thing in the world. Jake looked at the princess with genuine respect in his eyes. "She's brilliant, you know. I can tell. The way she responds to music, the creativity in how she moves, the way she figured out those throne controls so fast. That's not disability. That's just her way of being in the world. And it's beautiful." Velkara looked at her daughter and saw her through new eyes. Not as a burden to be managed or a problem to be hidden, but as a person who'd never been given the chance to show what she could do. "We've been doing this wrong," the Empress whispered. Jake smiled. "Maybe. But you can start doing it right. Starting now. Retriasef." The moment Velkara returned to the Imperial ship, she knew there would be trouble. Her chief advisor, General Thaxron, was waiting in the corridor outside her private chambers. His facial ridges were dark purple, a clear sign of anger in their species. "We need to speak immediately," he said, his voice clipped and formal. Velkara helped Sharera's hover throne through the doorway into their quarters. Her daughter was already half asleep, exhausted from the dancing but still smiling. "It can wait until morning." "It cannot." Thaxron followed them inside, breaking about a dozen rules of protocol. "The council is demanding an emergency session. Your Majesty, what happened at that human station has become a crisis." Velkara felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Within minutes, her private chamber was filled with advisors, all of them talking over each other. Their voices rose in a cacophony of panic and outrage. The images are everywhere. Every news network from here to the outer colonies. The princess displayed like some sort of. "Stop." Velkara's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent. "Show me these images you're so concerned about." One of the advisors activated the holographic displays. Screens materialized throughout the room, floating in the air, each one showing different angles of what had happened at Starlight Commons. There was Sharera, her hover throne spinning and bobbing to the music. There was Jake, dancing around her with that enormous smile on his face. There was the moment when they'd both jumped together, the throne lifting as Jake leaped, perfectly synchronized. And in every image, every video clip, Sharera was radiant. She was laughing. She was alive in a way Velkara had never seen before. "Look at the comments," Thaxron said grimly. "Look at what people are saying." The Empress expected mockery. She expected cruelty. She braced herself to see her daughter ridiculed across the galaxy. But that's not what she found. "This is the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. The human and the princess, pure joy. I didn't know Zethrani could move like that. She's incredible. Who's cutting onions in here?" I'm definitely not crying. Comment after comment from dozens of different species. Most of them were positive. Most of them were amazed. This is a disaster, one of the advisors insisted. The princess's condition is now known throughout the empire. The shame. What shame? Velkara asked quietly. The advisor blinked. Your Majesty? I asked what shame. My daughter danced. She experienced joy. Where is the shame in that? But the tradition. Show me the private messages, Velkara interrupted. You said there were private messages? An assistant nervously pulled up another screen. This one showed the Empress's private communication channel. The number in the corner made Velkara's breath catch. Over 800 unread messages, and they were still coming in. She opened the first one. It was from a Zethrani family name she didn't recognize. Your Majesty, my son has been in isolation for 8 years because he was born with malformed legs. Seeing the princess tonight gave us hope for the first time since his birth. Thank you. The second message, I've hidden my condition my entire life, wearing special garments to appear normal. If royalty can be seen as they truly are, maybe I can too. The third, thank you for showing us we're not alone. My daughter cried happy tears watching the princess dance. She's never seen someone like herself treated with such dignity. Message after message. Hundreds of them. All from Zethrani families who had been hiding, suffering in silence, believing they were the only ones carrying this burden of shame. Velkara scrolled through them with shaking hands. How many? How many of her people had been living like this? Hidden away, told they were too imperfect to be seen, denied the chance to live full lives? This changes nothing, Thaxron said firmly. The princess's condition is a private matter. It should have remained private. We can issue a statement explaining that this was a momentary lapse in judgment. Leave, Velkara said quietly. Your Majesty? All of you. Leave. Now. When the advisors had filed out, still muttering protests, Velkara sat alone in her chambers. Sharera had fallen asleep in her hover throne, still smiling. The Empress pulled up the human station's information network and began to search. She read about Earth's history. About something called the disability rights movement. About laws they'd passed, accommodations they'd built, attitudes they'd changed over centuries of slow, painful progress. She read about humans who couldn't walk leading corporations. About blind humans who'd become renowned musicians. About deaf humans who'd become artists. About humans with conditions that affected their minds finding ways to contribute through technology and support systems. The humans had a phrase that kept appearing, nothing about us without us. It meant that disabled people should be part of the conversation about their own lives. They shouldn't be hidden away and spoken for. They should be heard. How many brilliant minds had the Zethrani Empire locked away? How many innovations had died in isolation because the person who thought of them wasn't considered perfect enough to be listened to? The empire was vast. It was powerful. It controlled hundreds of star systems. But it was stagnant. They hadn't had a major scientific breakthrough in decades. Their art had become repetitive. Their culture had stopped evolving. Maybe the two things were connected. As dawn broke over the ship's viewing windows, Velkara made her decision. She called her personal assistant, a young Zethrani named Pelnine who'd always been kind to Sharera. Schedule another visit to the human station for next week, she said. And contact that waiter. Jake. Tell him I want to hire him as a consultant to the Imperial Court. Pelnine's eyes widened. Your Majesty, the Council will never approve. I'm not asking for their approval. Velkara stood looking out at the stars. The Council doesn't decide what my daughter deserves. I do. And she deserves the same thing every person deserves regardless of how their body works. What's that, Your Majesty? A chance to live. Velkara turned back to her assistant. Just a chance to live in the world as she is. That's not too much to ask. Pelnine smiled, something like hope flickering in their eyes. No, Your Majesty. It's not too much at all. 6 months had passed since that night at Starlight Commons. 6 months of heated debates, angry council meetings, and threats of political rebellion. But Empress Velkara had not wavered. Now she stood in the great chamber of the Imperial Congress, the most powerful governing body in the Zethrani Empire. Thousands of representatives filled the tiered seating that rose up like a massive amphitheater. Every eye was on her. And beside her, not hidden behind her throne, not tucked away in a private chamber, but right beside her at the podium, was Sharera. Her daughter's hover throne gleamed under the chamber lights. Sharera sat straighter than usual, her tentacles arranged carefully over the armrests. She was nervous. Velkara could see the slight tremor in her limbs. But she was there, visible to everyone, and that was what mattered. The Empress activated the main speaker system. Her voice echoed through the massive chamber. Members of the Imperial Congress, I stand before you today to announce the Accessibility Reformation Act. The murmuring started immediately, but Velkara continued. This act will guarantee that every Zethrani citizen, regardless of their physical or mental abilities, will have equal access to education, employment, and public life. We will redesign our cities to accommodate different forms of mobility. We will restructure our schools to support different learning needs. We will remake our workplaces to allow everyone to contribute their talents. The murmuring grew louder. Velkara could see representatives turning to each other, their facial ridges darkening with displeasure. Furthermore, she said, raising her voice, we will be welcoming Human Cultural Ambassador Jake Reed and his sister Lily to our capital. They will help guide this transition, sharing what humanity has learned about building a truly inclusive society. The chamber erupted. Representatives stood, shouting over each other. The noise was deafening. This is madness. Councillor Drextar's voice boomed above the rest. He was one of the oldest and most traditional members of the Congress. We are Zethrani. We are the pinnacle of evolution. We are perfection itself. You would have us lower ourselves, accommodate weakness, celebrate imperfection. The chamber fell silent, waiting for the Empress's response. Velkara looked out at the sea of faces. These were people she'd worked with for years. People who'd advised her, supported her, helped her rule. But they were wrong about this. She knew it in her bones. We are not perfection, she said quietly, but her words carried through the chamber. We are weak. Gasps rippled through the crowd. We are weak because we have exiled our own people for circumstances beyond their control. We have locked away brilliant minds because we valued how bodies look over what minds can create. We have hidden children from their own families, built institutions to contain anyone who doesn't meet our narrow definition of acceptable. Her voice grew stronger. We have taken people with so much to offer and told them they are worthless. And in doing so we have made ourselves smaller, weaker, less than we could be. The princess should never have been put on display, another counselor shouted. It was cruel to subject her to public scrutiny. Before Velkara could respond, Sharera moved. Her tentacle reached for the control panel on her hover throne. She activated the speaker system that had been installed specifically for this moment. When her clicking voice came through, amplified and clear, the entire chamber froze. I am Zethrani, Sharera said, her words slow but deliberate. I am your princess. I was born with a body that does not work the way yours does. I am disabled. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. And I am worthy, Sharera finished. For 3 long seconds nothing happened. Then, from the upper gallery where ordinary citizens were allowed to observe the proceedings, came a sound. Applause. It started with 1 person. Then 2. Then 10. Then it spread like fire through the gallery. People were standing, clapping, some of them crying. Velkara looked up and saw them. Families she'd never noticed before. A Zethrani in a mobility device similar to Sharera's hover throne. Another with prosthetic limbs. A child being held by parents, the child's body twisted in ways that spoke of a condition similar to her daughter's. They'd been there all along. Hidden in plain sight. Pretending to be normal. Suffering in silence. But now they were standing and they were visible and they were not alone anymore. More joined them. Representatives in the lower chambers who had their own hidden stories, their own family secrets. One by one they stood in solidarity. The vote was close. Closer than Velkara had hoped. But it passed. The Accessibility Reformation Act became law. 2 years later, Velkara stood on an observation deck on the human station, watching through the large window. Beyond the transparent wall, in the zero-gravity performance space, a dance troupe moved through the void. Sharera was among them. Her hover throne had been modified for zero-gravity work, and she spun through space alongside performers from 6 different species. A human dancer without legs propelled himself with his arms. A Korthan with 1 wing flew in spirals. A Felixian who was blind navigated by sound. And they were beautiful together. Jake stood beside the Empress, also watching. He'd spent the past 2 years working with Zethrani architects, educators and city planners. His sister Lily had helped design adaptive learning programs. Together they'd helped reshape an empire. You changed everything, Jake said softly. An entire empire because you were willing to see differently. No, Velkara replied. You changed us. By seeing my daughter not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who deserved to dance. by showing us that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. She watched Sharera spin through a beam of starlight, her tentacles extended, her hover throne leaving trails of light in its wake. Humans are strange, Velkara continued. You're not the most powerful species in the galaxy. You don't have the best technology. You're not the oldest civilization or the largest empire. But you have something we lost somewhere along the way. What's that? Jake asked. You refuse to leave anyone behind. You look at someone who's different and see potential instead of problems. You adapt the world instead of asking people to adapt to impossible standards. She smiled. That stubborn insistence that everyone deserves a chance, that's what makes you extraordinary. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. It's just the right thing to do. Exactly, Velkara said. It's just the right thing to do. And somehow we'd forgotten that. Thank you for reminding us. Below them, Sharera completed a complex spiral maneuver, her hover throne glowing against the darkness of space. She was laughing. Velkara couldn't hear it through the observation window, but she could see it in every line of her daughter's body. Her daughter was free. And because of that, an entire empire had begun to learn what freedom really meant.